So this video will cover the long-run macroeconomic equilibrium situation using the neoclassical aggregate demand, aggregate supply model, and we'll tie this to the critique by neoclassical theorists of government attempts to fine-tune economic outcomes by using aggregate demand management policies. So key concepts to consider here. Firstly, our diagram shows an economy in macroeconomic equilibrium where we have the short-run aggregate supply curve intersecting the aggregate demand supply or aggregate demand curve at the long-run aggregate supply at potential output, with the average price level at this rate right here. And the potential output, we can also refer to this as the full employment output as well. Finally, we'll consider that the real output of the economy, which is where AD intersects short-run aggregate supply, SRAS, is equal to potential output of the economy. Now what we're going to do is we're going to throw this economy into a situation where the real output is actually below the potential output of the economy. We'll do this by simply shifting down the aggregate demand curve here so that we have an intersection point with the SRAS curve, which is behind or below the potential output of the economy. And then we will adjust the price level. So this will be our starting point for our analysis or the neoclassical critique of the aggregate demand side management policies of government. And we see here that the economy, the real output of the economy here, is below potential output. So we will call this Y1. So because we have this output gap here where Y1 is less than YP, the potential output of the economy, we have unemployment which is beyond the natural level of unemployment that any dynamic economy experiences. And here we have the average price level set. Governments have at their disposal a number of policy tools with which they can manipulate aggregate demand, which, if you remember, is the combination of consumption, government spending, investment by firms, and net exports minus imports. So for example, governments could choose to lower income taxes, lower business taxes, which would encourage consumption and investment spending, which would increase aggregate demand. Additionally, they could increase the money supply, which would bring down interest rates and encourage borrowing on the part of firms and consumers, which would then fuel consumption and investment, increasing aggregate demand. And finally, they could just choose to go into a deficit spending situation where they increase government spending, also increasing aggregate demand. So here I've added in an increase in aggregate demand. Let's say it's a result of two policies the government decides to pursue. One, it increases government spending, and two, it lowers interest rates through an increase in money supply, encouraging borrowing and then spending. And what we end up with then is a new intersection, like we saw at the beginning of the video, where AD1 now, our new aggregate demand curve, intersects the SRAS curve at LRAS, at the potential output. And so at this situation then, policymakers have achieved their goal where they have increased output from below potential back to potential, the full employment output, which means unemployment has been reduced, but there is a consequence of a higher price level, represented by APL1, which shows that the economy has had some inflation. This is a short-run situation in the neoclassical model due to the fact that it's a time frame in which there has been a rise in the price level, but not enough time for factor prices, particularly wages, to respond to the price level increase. Two things are essentially going to happen over this time frame. Number one, as output increases, there will be a higher demand for labor to support increases in output, which means that labor is going to become more scarce. And in order for firms to secure access to labor, likely there's going to be a process where they offer higher wages to ensure that they get those workers. So we'll see wages bid up. Additionally, labor is going to see that their purchasing power has decreased due to the increase in price level. And as a result, they too are going to see or desire opportunities for their wages to increase so that their real income is not deteriorated by rising price levels. So they'll seek raises as well. And what this then means to firms is that factor price wages are going to increase. How are firms going to respond? Well, across the whole economy, costs of production are going to increase due to the higher wages. And then what we'll see is that in response to this, firms are going to decrease their supply. They'll be less willing and able to provide the same level of output as before at previous prices due to the fact that they're paying out more in the form of wages. So now we have a new short-run aggregate supply curve represented by SRAS1. And the outcome of this change in aggregate supply, or the decision-making of firms, is represented by a higher price level and, unfortunately, again, a decline in real output, where real output falls below potential output again. And we have a situation where we have higher prices, as represented by the increase in the average price level here to APL2. So this new macroeconomic disequilibrium, that we've reached now really forms the foundation for the critique by neoclassical theorists of aggregate demand side policies to achieve full employment. We saw that in the initial state of the economy's real output was here at Y1, which was below the potential output of the economy. The government made its attempt through government spending and a decrease in interest rates to plump up economic activity on the aggregate demand side of the economy. So we saw aggregate demand shift out from AD to AD1. And then we saw this new short-run equilibrium where AD1 intersected the original SRAS curve at LRAS, at the potential output. But unfortunately, that is a short-run situation, and what we see is the price level rises as well. There is our short run, where we have an increase in output to potential, and we suffer the consequence of higher prices. Unfortunately, as the economy adjusts and as wages are bid up for the reasons mentioned before, cost of production increase, and then the short-run aggregate supply curve shifts to SRAS1, and we now have a new disequilibrium situation, which is below YP, below potential output, at Y1 again, essentially, where SRAS1 intersects AD1, we lose the extra output that we're able to create, which also means that we're going to lose those jobs. So those jobs that we saw kind of essentially created or saw people move back into jobs, we're now going to see jobs lost due to this decrease in output. And even more concerning then, as far as neoclassical theorists are concerned, is that we have another rise in the price level. In order to evaluate the impact of the rise in the price level, you can now refer to your evaluative notes on the impact of rising prices.